yes, of course, we want more people to start companies and to take tech out of the lab and into the field, but people shouldn't feel like they need to be limited there. It's about citizenship on a global level. When we define citizenship, it's what do you do with your chewing gum when no one's looking? Do you put it underneath the bench that you're sitting on? Do you put the extra effort in to walk it to the trash, right? It's taking that larger scale. What is the impact that you're doing to make sure you're being that member of society?
Welcome to Amplified, Hub71's flagship podcast, where we go behind the headlines and we delve deeper into the founders and their stories. I'm Zain Tarawneh, ClimateTech Lead at Hub71, and today we're going to be talking about climate tech and the climate. And often when we talk about climate, it feels very far removed, very abstract, and not very relatable to everyday life. But in fact, climate is connected to everything we do. It's the food that we eat, it's the water that we drink, it's the clothes that we wear and the things that we use. So today I'd like to bring that home, and we have two phenomenal founders with us, Vriko and Paul, which I'll let give their introductions. But before starting, I'd like to start with an anecdote that is very personal to me around this climate tech topic. Before my role at Hub71, I was a co-founder of a climate tech startup, and my why for joining this company was always around nature. I'm a person that is an avid enthusiast with anything outdoors. I like to surf, I like to hike, and when I got into the space of climate sustainability, and we'll untangle all of these terms later in this podcast, that was kind of my North Star. But obviously, when you're building a company, you get entangled in all of the product market fit, commercialization, pitch decks, investors, and you can lose sight of that North Star and the why. And that's why this is very personal to me, because I would love to delve into your stories and your whys and what brought you here to Abu Dhabi, what made you invest your lives and careers into a space that probably comes from home, because climate tech is a very impact-driven space. And hear your stories, the humans behind the businesses, and then talk a bit more, how do you kind of untangle these difficulties of keeping your purpose with profit and commercialization, and act in the space of, the startup hustle and grind, while keeping your why intact along the way and not losing sight of that. So before we start, I'd love for both of you to do an introduction. We have Vriko from Archireef and Paul from Atmocooling. We can start with Vriko, and then we can delve into your why.
Sure. Thank you for having us again, Zain. I'm Vriko, the co-founder and CEO of Archireef, and we are a nature tech company aimed at deploying nature-based solutions to restore degraded marine ecosystems.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Paul Mahacek, CEO and co-founder of Atmocooling. What Atmocooling does is we take saline waters, either seawater or brine reject from desalinization or other potential wastewaters, and we accelerate that evaporation for evaporative cooling. And we do this at large scale for outdoor agriculture, for utility scale solar, and urban cooling.
Great. I know you both very well on a personal and professional level, and you've been doing a lot of impressive things. I think we'll get to decoding that because both of you, I think this is like very, let's say, popular in the climate tech space, that the founders are usually engineers or scientists. Vriko is a marine biologist and Paul is an electrical engineer. And I feel like also something that I'd love to pick your brain on, and how do you translate what you do in a very kind of specific and technical and scientific sense to, investors, everyday people, and bring it back home to what it could affect of day-to-day life. But before we talk about the tech and the business, I want to delve in before your mission, like, who are you both? And we'll start with Vriko. Can you share with us a moment early in life or later where it really shaped how you see the world and your relationship with nature and climate?
So I was born and raised in Hong Kong in the 90s. And what is very interesting is that despite Hong Kong being a concrete jungle, a financial hub, we actually have 40% of our land being protected as a country park. So we have, on one side, we have, as mentioned, concrete jungles. But on the other side, we actually have beautiful nature. And I was lucky enough that I spent a lot of time in the water, thanks to my dad. So I think at early age, I remember going to this particular beach, stepped into the water. I didn't really dive, but I remember stumble onto something that cut my feet. And that became the reason for me to go back to that particular site after I got my diving license. And that's almost 10 years later, to figure out that that particular place has already degraded into complete sand and mud. That was probably the first moment that I realized that something's happening in the water.
What was the cut from?
I think it's likely to be corals or
Corals,
oysters.
okay.
My dad told me that's coral. I didn't really fact check, but at the very least, about 10 years later, I know that there's nothing that exists in the mud years later. But only in 2014, I then realized that I've actually witnessed coral degradation firsthand. I was working on the coral research and diving weekly on that particular area in the western side of Hong Kong. And I've seen a small patch of coral community, not too big, it's probably like 4 size of this couch. And seeing that degrading and eventually turning into sand happening only over a course of 2 months, that set the stone for me to, first, I want to understand what's happening. And the second is that if there's anything that we can do to reverse the damage. So from then on, I started researching coral restoration in particular.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. For me, I don't know if there was one single event, because it's kind of been a through line, both as a child and then through my career, is working to support climate. I've worked several decades now doing engineering really in support of climate research. Be it ocean acidification studies, working in the Arctic, the Antarctic. Growing up, it was about agriculture. Both my parents are involved in agriculture, and for me, it was always making sure that you could connect that link of how did food get to your table. If you ask your child, where does milk come from, and they say the grocery store, there may be some work that we need to do here to understand what was that supply chain, where did it come from, where's that cow, where did that cow's food come from, and really understanding and linking those two things together. And just seeing the direction that climate is going over the past decades, and knowing that hotter and drier will continue to be the name of the game. It's more and more difficult for farmers to be productive with the land that they have. Before this, I spent significant time, half a decade, working on a company doing indoor farming. If you're following along with the challenges of indoor farming, you know that the CapEx and OpEx can be very difficult unless you have very specific crops. So the concept that we're trying to do is to take those benefits of indoor farming, where temperature and humidity can be perfect for plants to go through photosynthesis, for plants to grow, and be able to take that tech and apply it to outdoor and more traditional. So corn and wheat and potatoes and onions, the staples, the things that are on our tables every single day, those are the crops that we're trying to serve.
And do you think that your kind of interest in nature, climate, food, which are all different areas of climate, do you think it was just matched with your vocation as an engineer, or was there like a personal moment where you realized that you are happy to set your, let's say, career in this direction, or has it always been more of like a vocational direction that kind of serendipitously also came into a space of impact? Like, I'm just curious if you can remember a moment, in childhood or at some point where you felt like, this is actually what I want to be doing.
I think that there's a little bit of luck that's there. I won't discount hard work and preparation from my parents for the path that I went on. But I recognize I've been provided with a lot of good opportunities, career-wise, education-wise, to go down this path. And I think it's only more recently to where I finally was like, okay, things are a little more stable. I have a lot more control over the things that I want to do, and identifying that this was what I wanted to work on. So, this was a really big opportunity for me. My co-founder had already been in work on the technology, so I came in to join that project. because I saw this as that direct response to vertical and indoor farming and that next level of iteration.
In a very non-CV way, and in a story, can you both tell me the journeys that you've had from that moment, that moment that you cut your feet with the oyster or the coral, and that moment where you felt that, things were aligned for you to go to the space and you were asking questions about like what's on our table, and walk us through your story of how you ended up here in Abu Dhabi and just the steps that you took to what was intentional, what was an accident, how did you both end up here from that moment? I know it's a long story, but try and, not the CV pitch version, but the Vriko and Paul version of that.
Right. For me, I was super lucky. So when I started doing my PhD, one of the chapter is all about these 3D printed reef tiles that's made from clay. I was one of the co-inventors. It was the first of its kind. But as a researcher, that's also where you stopped. You find a problem, you find a solution, you publish it, and then you kind of have to move on. I was very lucky that I was also at that moment that I realized that's not why I started doing research. It was from very personal experience that I wanted to do something and I wanted to understand more. So from then, we were very lucky. That was the year of 2019 to 2022, where we got the opportunity to be featured on the likes of Economic Forum, CNN, to talk about nature solutions and how we can potentially reverse the climate damage, particularly on coral reefs. So that also set us a good opportunity that ADQ, one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in Abu Dhabi, proactively reached out to us and say that, hey, we're interested in your solution. We want to deploy your solution in Abu Dhabi because we need it. So it was the kind of pivotal moment for us to realize that, okay, at first we know that the solution worked, but how do we commercialize it and where are the paying clients was still a big question mark. But then ADQ gave us the opportunity that there is a need from the market. There is support from the giants in the industry that potentially have the impact across different industry, across their portfolio. And that also opened the door for us to enter the UAE, where it's now our operational headquarters. And that's also where we are producing the reef tiles and other eco-engineering solutions from the UAE.
So that's your main, you have a base in Hong Kong and a base in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, we started in Hong Kong, but then we expanded to Abu Dhabi as our next launch pad.
Okay, so it was a bit of luck there that you kind of, had your research and your thesis and it was displayed and one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world.
It's a lot of serendipity. I guess being at the right place at the right time. Yes, we have the product, but we didn't see through the future of nature tech or climate tech. At least 5 years ago, it was not heavily discussed, but it was this opportunity that going into the right place, which is the UAE, for us to launch this and scale this further, gave us the opportunity to shape it to where Archireef is today, but also understanding, being one of the players and stakeholders in shaping the market development.
Would you have ever imagined that 10 years ago to be in Abu Dhabi?
No, I guess starting the moment that you decide to be a marine biologist, you probably wouldn't have ever thought about running a business. But yeah, here I am.
What about you, Paul?
Yeah. So when we started the company, we incubated in Paris a deep tech climate studio called Marble there. They were our first true believers in the technology. We had a close friend of Atmocooling that has been here in Abu Dhabi for 40 years. And, him understanding the tech and saying, hey, this is the place you need to be. This is the place you need to be. So it was almost three years ago that my co-founder and I, we first flew in. And within about 36 hours, we had a handshake deal to develop our pilot. It's the site that we're still on right now in Swehan. This is one of the hottest places on the planet. The UAE is unique in that it does have water. It has a lot of water, but it's saline water. Even there, 100 kilometers inland, we only have to go 10 meters down and we have access to water. So there's a lot of agriculture that I think people don't know that goes on there. But it needs help and it needs support. And we saw this as really having regulatory alignment, having monetary, and really having that drive and desire to change the way things have been done historically, to move forward. So all those things really did align. When you talk about luck, you did a lot of planning. You said the same thing, a lot of work that went into it to be ready when that luck came up. So I think that for us, it was something similar, that we were able to move quickly on that. We had done, we did a paid pilot in Morocco. We have engineers in the US, but we really operate here out of Abu Dhabi.
It's really interesting. There's this saying that I'm remembering with both of your stories. It's one of those sayings that some people say is Latin, others say it's an African proverb. So I don't know where it comes from, but it says chance favors a prepared mind. And I think there's something very interesting about, being ready and being prepared. And that's where you meet luck, or have space to meet luck, because I don't think some people, when they look at the lucky story or success, I think there's many definitions for success, but would see it as, oh, that was just like a lucky, that was like a lucky deal. That person's lucky. They were just in the right place in the right room. But I think what they forget is the readiness, right? Like always being prepared to be met with it. And I think that's one of those formulas that you can't really, as many accelerators, incubators, and things that you do, that you can't really instill in a founder. It's just kind of a way of being. And I'm sure with that preparation, and with the luck that meets it, there comes a lot of hardships as well, and a lot of challenges and obstacles, and tensions, right? And I kind of want to move to that point, like in your story, in your building, what has been the most difficult parts of building your companies, from a emotional point of view, from a practical point of view, from an ethical point of view as well? Because I know that, the whole idea of the perfect triangle of people, profit, planet is not always in a perfect triangle, right? And there are things that are compromised on the basis of others. So as, scientists and engineers, but also as founders, what have been the main challenges and obstacles of getting here so far?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. There's so many hard lessons that we learned during the way. I think as a scientist, just thinking back, this pace was so different. When we first got here, we already have the first product, which is the reef tiles. And that was 8 years of work in the doing. And the second product that it was inception, born and actualized, prototype and deployed in Abu Dhabi, was actually the eco seawall panels. And that was done within 18 months. So that scale of jumping is not only about, how do you conceptualize, how do you validate this, how do you go into the industry and make sure that there are actual needs for it. And then the next question is, how do you make it work? All of that need to compress in a much faster pace. I think that's probably one of the unexpected lifestyle that I thought being a founder and a CEO is a lot more comfortable, but being the founder and the CEO of a startup is completely different. As that there's a lot of grinding, but I think definitely catching up the speed and having that connection to the market and knowing and the ability to rally the troop and rally the people around you to make it work at all fronts is definitely something that I've learned along the way.
Do you think the speed of, growing and scaling in the tech world is at odds with a lot of the speed that is expected in science and scientific research?
Yes, maybe that's a little bit controversial. I think science or conservation overall has been taking this more traditional, preservative, passive approach, which is probably valid a couple of decades ago when climate change, when we haven't reached or getting close to the tipping point, when we still had a chance, then I think removing the stressors back then, taking a more conservative approach would work and would give the space and time for nature to recover. But we are also already at the tipping point right now that it's not like science need to be fast necessarily. But if you're talking about nature tech, the reality is that climate change is also happening so quickly that we need to catch up with that pace before the window change, before the window close. So I don't necessarily say that, well, science have to be fast and it's wrong to be slow. No, but it's just that in that particular place, if we're deploying science for an action for nature, then we need to make sure that what's the timeline that we can operate in.
Yeah, I want to add on to that because it's such a great take there, and it is important to also recognize a lot of the science is in. This is done. If there's people at home that don't understand that, 1.5 degrees Celsius, we've missed that target. We're talking 2.5 degrees Celsius that the temperature is going to increase. We don't need to wait for more science to come in. The science took its time. It did things correctly. It's overwhelming, right? Now the time is action, and action is what needs to happen quickly. So I think for both of us, this is kind of the take that you saw, that we looked at the science, we understood what was going on, and decided, I need to be part of the solution. I need to get out there and have an impact in the world. And now is the time that we need to move fast. Yeah.
Absolutely great.
I think it's interesting in the climate tech space, which we will also break down in a bit, because I think there's a lot of, myths and versions, and there's nature tech, there's climate tech, there's ESG, there's sustainability. Depends who you ask, but that is also due to the fact that it's a very multifaceted space, especially when you want to put it up the pace of this, tech, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and there, I think in the past decade, there's been a lot of learnings, let's say, from the market that is ever growing, but it is one that is very interdisciplinary, and the teams that are required to pull that through, and what success requires is that it's, has to be science-backed, but also has, the right team and the people behind it, and that team is usually not just scientific or not just commercial, and if you tip over from one side to the other, that could be it could be I don't want to say the failure, but it's a very delicate balance of getting in the right formula of people and minds. Even if you have the best science and it's commercially viable, you still need to market it, and you need to package it, and you need to sell it, right? So it has the business as usual elements, plus with the science and engineering and the validation. How did you find how did you navigate that and find your people and your teams and your tribes, and what were the challenges there to make sure that you cover all the bases of? It's an extra pressure, I think. Climate tech is one of those things, and this is something that is not often spoken about, especially if both of you are in the hard tech, deep tech space. So there's a lot of manufacturing, there's deployment. So what has been your learnings from that and building teams that support that mission?
I think that's also how I see conservation or nature tech, not necessarily as a scientific subject per se. It is really interdisciplinary. I think using Archireef as an example, where we deploy material science, engineers, politicians even coming in to understand what's really happening in the regulatory space, is so interdisciplinary. And I think one common trait that we found across the board, across team members, and even partners that we work well, is that they don't take themselves too seriously. Don't come in as a PhD because I have this PhD title and then it's all about science. It's never that case. When you deploy a solution in the real world, it is really about compromising. It's really about finding the common ground that, okay, within this budget, within this team capacity, under this framework, with this potential client, what can we actually make together? Like, what can we actually create together? So I think it's really about having a group of people that's not necessarily about what they can bring to the table. It's more about what we can co-create together and have this inclusivity and co-creation in the process.
Do you find it difficult to find, from like, let's say, the leadership level team members? I know your co-founder very well, and I think you guys, for me, like from a personal and professional way. And by the way, Vriko and I actually came to Abu Dhabi at the same time. We were part of the same cohort in Hub71. So, our relationship has evolved in many different ways. But I always use it as an example of, you and Dennis having a great mix of startup entrepreneur, commercial minded, and like pure scientist. And that also, I think, has its readiness meets luck formula, right? How did you find trickling that down to the rest of your team and building a culture around it?
I think it's a very organic process. To be very honest and open as well, like expanding to the UAE was not part of the deal when ADQ invested in us. It was just a natural process. They want to manufacture, we want to find the talents, and just naturally here. And in the process, I think one of the many things that I also discovered is actually diversity. It's just so natural that the more diverse background you have, the more like diverse macro environment that you create, naturally you have this organic magic that happens between, because it's no longer, especially coming where I'm from, maybe success is clearly defined especially in the financial sector, that maybe you have a more stringent and less freedom or wiggle room to be different. Whereas here there's in a way there's no particular standard or definition. You can be whoever you want, and in that journey it's not a wild card anymore, because change is the constant here. So I think in that sense, it's not necessarily like we have a formula. It's just a very organic, natural process.
What about you, Paul?
Yeah, team building is something I've really enjoyed. This is not my first rodeo in terms of startup. This is my first time in the CEO hot seat. So that is a little bit different. But that was one of the nice things when we started the company. I had this network to pull on for early folks who were more than happy to jump on this roller coaster with me. Folks that I knew and I trusted, and we understood the work styles. So we're able to move very quickly. That has been really great for the start. It's especially critical for startups to have the right team at the beginning, because that can be devastating to lose or to have bad team fit. So that was really nice. In the more recent times, we've also been lucky with some of the folks that we've hired here locally who've honestly surprised me. People who are hungry to learn. At the last company I was at, I think this was maybe one of the things I enjoyed the most. I kind of transitioned from a technical at the company before that into an executive role where I was running engineering. We had about 40 folks working with me in engineering, a lot of new grads, a lot of new students. So being able to impart the learnings that you don't learn in the university, and and understanding how do you move quickly and how do you make good judgment and kind of build up more of that gut feel was one of the things I think I enjoyed the most. And so again, in the current role, with some of the folks that we have working out on site with us right now, the way that they're progressing has been fantastic to see. That journey, and say, look, if you do this and this, you're going to have so many more opportunities in the future, because we know that Atmocooling is not going to be the last job that they ever have. They need something next after that. So making sure that they're prepared and improving their potential, I think I've really enjoyed that personally.
It's interesting. Usually when you hear podcasts or hear founders speak, one of the things that always comes up is that no one really wants to talk about, because it's the elephant in the room, is like team dynamics and talent and people. And it could just be luck that I'm sitting with two people with different experiences, but with a very intentional and organic way of building teams. And I wonder whether that, to bring it back to ClimateTech, is something that pertains to the space of, do you think the fact that there is a mission that is larger, that maybe perhaps we will not necessarily see the results of necessarily, maybe you're thinking ahead, because usually when people think about climate and nature, they're like, I want to build a place where my kids and their kids would actually prosper, right? So there is something that is very altruistic. And again, it's that delicate balance, because you don't want to be too altruistic and talk about building something so much for the future that it has no life in the present, and you don't want to do something that solves tomorrow and makes money now, and you're not really caring too much about the future. Do you think this space, the ClimateTech space, and the way that you've interacted with the people that are in it, whether that be the talent and the people that you hire in your teams, the investors that you speak to, the clients that you get, because it's purpose driven, attracts a different type of people? Is that a wrong or too much of a, not to make it a fluffy, a fluffy conviction, but it's a very interesting thing when I speak to climate and nature tech people. There's always that why. And I'm just
mission driven is the through line. Absolutely. There's a sustainability WhatsApp group for the UAE, and I think there's almost 1,000 people that are in there, and a lot of people are active. We see that, I think that community here is really building up. But globally, I think there's a lot of ways for people to make money in the world, and ClimateTech probably isn't the most lucrative. For our companies, we have a profitable pathways. We know how to make money. We know that financial sustainability has to be paired with environmental sustainability, or it won't work. But if you've chosen to go that, it's got to be mission. It's got to be there, because you would go into finance, you would be doing other things that, you know, are potentially easier ways to do this. This is the hard work.
Yeah, I think really well said. I think the why is always the mission, and the mission is always the anchor. It's also our ethical anchor as well. Like, it's the fundamentals of what we do and what we bring to the table. And when it comes to commercializing it, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to action, it needs to be financially sustainable as well. So I think I personally see the two like going hand in hand. Yes, it's not the most lucrative, but we are also being very lucky to be in a market trend and shift that nature is no longer sidelined. It's actually being internalized and being regulated by the likes of TNFD or IFC Performance Standard 6 and net gain strategies. All of that are helping us, giving us the framework and the incentive or penalty to actually realize and deploy this capital in the right place. So in a way, like, I would say if this happened like 10 years ago, we were probably in a totally different ball game. But I would say the market is definitely catching up. They are understanding and actually feeling that the impact of nature risk are damaging their assets, and hence they will have to take action. Otherwise they lose value in their assets, or they're getting penalized by the regulations.
Yeah, I think nature and climate has made its way through, let's say, business as usual, capitalism, whatever you want to call it. At some point, it had to build its own culture, and I feel like, you know, being in the space as well, I'm sure both of you would agree. It's large. Yes, you have WhatsApp groups and Slack channels, but it's a very small world. Like, if you go to Singapore, and you say, "Hey, Zain, I'm going to Singapore. Can you connect me to someone?" Probably the person I'd connect you to is like, you know, 2 degrees of separation from someone else that you know in Hong Kong, right? And if you go to New York and to go to Climate Week, so there's something about that like community and the people that is quite small and expanding, which is very promising. But I feel like there are a bit of fine tunings of something that you brought up, Vriko, is that how do you align the pace with the speed, with the mission? And it's all of these like small tweaks towards like products and services and solutions that actually would get up to speed with the fact that we're a bit too late, to your point, Paul. And that's something that people don't really remember when they're thinking about climate change. It's so far removed, and this is why I prefaced this talk with, you know, people see it as this abstract thing that's maybe like the UN or, you know, nature, or like saving the animals or saving the trees, but it's actually something that really crosses across almost everything that we do in our daily lives. And I'd love to ask you, in your own definitions, if we were to kind of, you know, someone completely outside of the field, someone that could be your grandmother now or a 10-year-old child, like, how do you explain climate tech? And the second question to follow up with that is that how would you explain what you do in climate tech in those terms? And then can you relate what you do and what your mission is to something that touches people in their everyday life? That they can say like, oh, I understand that this is a solution to that. It's flipping what you guys said in the beginning of how you explained your companies on its head.
Yeah.
Almost upside down. But I'm very curious to how you translate it in the simplest terms possible.
And you've got a couple parts to the question. We can break them up. I'll talk about what I see as climate tech is any new technology or technology solution where the primary focus is around improving our climate. And this is the atmosphere, this is the water, you know, everything that surrounds us. And there's 2 big groups that sit within climate tech and sustainability. One is mitigation, and this is where we need to offset what we've put into the environment. If we talk about direct capture of CO2 from the air, like this is a mitigation, planting trees, these are mitigations. The other half, though, is adaptation. And I don't know if what you qualify for the work you're doing. This is what we kind of count. There are elements of mitigation, but adaptation, because we know we've missed these targets, we're going to be living in a different planet moving forward. It's going to be hotter and drier. This is what we've talked about already. And it's making sure that our people, these populations, can live there, can continue to have food on your table, have clean energy, to have clean air and water to breathe. So it's about adapting to these changes that are coming in the most efficient way possible.
So mitigation is almost the solutions that we are doing and producing to take responsibility for what we didn't take responsibility for in the past. So whether that's, like
it can be carbon sequestration projects. It can be, taking coal burning plants offline, replacing them with solar. These types of things that directly impact without taking action. That status quo would continue to, increase the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. It's actively working the other direction.
And adaptation, saying this is where we're at. So let's build products and solutions
Exactly
that allow us to accept and think in a preventative way for the future.
Absolutely. And they could be both physical world solutions, but it can also be digital. And a lot of times digital are the easier ones to roll out. It's the easier ones to get investment backing because it's a software solution that scales. It can be on the mitigation side, it's apps that help you make choices about what you're eating, sustainability for food and the CO2 impact there. On the adaptation side, insurance is one of the big ones that we're seeing, and it's ways for insurance companies to understand this is going to be more flood prone, this is going to be more fire prone. How do we need to make decisions about how we're supporting our customers and moving through? So there's different elements there, both in the physical and the digital space. Obviously, we're working in the physical space for what we're working on.
And how would you define what Atmocooling does if you're explaining it to a 10-year-old kid?
Yeah. So the easiest way to do this is evaporative cooling. And we kind of know this inherently, depending on where you live. If you live inland and it's a hot summer day, you go to the beach because what you're actually getting is closer to that water and you're getting cooling off of it. If you sat on a patio on a restaurant on a hot summer and they turn those misters on and it cools down the whole patio area, it's the same physics there that we're talking about. We're doing that at very, very large scale. So we are recreating marine and coastal climates inland. And we do this using what's abundant is not fresh water, because fresh water is only about 3% of the water that we have. Here in the UAE, we actually have almost no fresh water, no true fresh water that's available. Lots and lots of access to saline, seawater, brine reject from desalinization. So we take that, and that's our working fluid that we use, evaporate that, create large, cool microclimates. So in terms of the application, it's the ability to extend your growing season, to have more reliable crop growth, to reduce the amount of water that you need to grow those crops. For solar panels, we can cool down those solar panels because the hotter they get, the less power they actually output. So even now in the middle of the summer, we have peak heat. We're not producing the maximum amount of solar power. We do that in the spring and the fall. And then for urban is the longer term, what we're trying to do. You get all these benefits of being able to use your outdoor space, that physical and mental health of getting out of your house, out of the indoors, reduced water for irrigating your green space. But the main thing we look at is decreasing the energy that you need to run your air conditioning system. So that's how we monetize on that.
So you create microclimates in the adaptation space, and you are doing it in a sustainable way with, adapting to. So for example, in the UAE, you were saying that there's barely any fresh water, so but there's abundance of water, but it's mostly saline. So you're creating a microenvironment for crops to grow that they otherwise wouldn't.
Exactly. So it's either improving the productivity of the crops that we do grow, or extending it so we can grow new crops, or taking the crops we do and extending the season. So if we get 6-7 months of growing, we're very lucky here. We can extend that 10, 11, 12 months, adding cover crop, different opportunities that we can have depending on how that farm wants to operate. Because if you've sunk cost into improving this land, let's use it for 12 months rather than just half the year. We can do much more that makes it more valuable. And it's large scale microclimates we're talking about. This is hundreds, thousands of hectares in size. So the goal would really be large scale terraformation that we're trying to make possible.
Terraformation.
Yeah.
I like that. Right. Should be like a name for
Yeah.
a movement, like terraformation.
Yeah.
Terraformations.
And how would you bring this back home to something that a person, in their everyday life, like drinking a coffee or...
Yeah. I think coffee is a great one to look at, because coffee is going to become more and more difficult for us to source globally. As temperatures continue to increase, that humidity is dropping out. Coffee beans are at risk right now. We have people that are working on synthetic coffees and that. We're coming from that other angle of how do we fix the climate you have so you could grow coffee. Specialty crops are a big target for us because it's a very high value per unit area that you can apply it to. But what it comes down to is the quality of what you have on offer in the grocery store is what we're talking about as well. I think if you look between the winter and the summer, you're going to see a difference in what's available. We have a lot more greenhouses that are going in here in the UAE, which means that we can all year round grow things, and those we get really good quality from. But the volume that we're able to produce isn't there, and it's not there for a lot more of the staple crops. So tomatoes and peppers and those things can be done, but a lot of those other things either need to be shipped in. Fodder is very, very difficult. So the quality of milk is hard for us to maintain all year round. But those are the things that we know that we can impact and improve.
So things that we consume.
Absolutely. It's the things that hit our table every single day. Yeah.
And Vriko?
I think it was a really good start. When it comes to nature, people often forgot about that. It is the other side of the climate. So one thing that I do want to talk about is that nature is the other side of the climate, and they're equally important. We talk about how important it is to take actions, and equally, I believe that we believe in the same philosophy of avoidance would have been the best scenario.
Absolutely.
But we missed that chance already. So going from avoidance, minimize, and mitigate, I think that's where we're looking at as well at Archireef, where we're not only that deploying these eco-engineering solutions to deploy an integrated ecosystem to bring so that we can give nature recovery a kickstart, but also to fill this connectivity back so that we can retain the integrity of the ecosystem health. In that sense, I think we also deploy monitoring technologies. One of the major reasons why people forgot about the nature for decades is also because we don't see or don't understand enough what's happening in the water. That missing link is also being helped by the technologies like photogrammetry. So at Archireef, we also create these digital twins to bring the actual reef in your face, in your screen, so that you can actually understand and see what's happening in the water. And in that regard, I think when it comes to nature tech, similar definition, it is all about the technology that you can deploy in the process, from identifying where the risks are, to the point how do you bring in hardware and product, which we also cover, to the point where we deploy monitoring solutions in extracting the data and getting a better understanding, even to the point that how do you even report nature risk and impact in the reporting system. So I think all of that technologies, again, we're extremely lucky to be in an era where we are still within this restoration window of the mitigation, of the adaptation window, but also we have all of these tools and technologies that are at our back pockets that we can deploy to accelerate the process.
So how would you explain climate tech in one sentence? I know it's reductive, it's challenging, but
in one sentence, that's even harder than explaining to your grandma. Technology, nature tech in one sentence.
I think we're CEOs and we have a hard time doing anything concisely. We like to talk, and that's our jobs. Yeah.
It's so hard. I don't think I have a good answer to that. One line.
2 lines.
Okay. Nature tech. Anything that helps nature to preserve and adapt for a better good or for a net positivity would count for as nature tech.
And for Archireef and in a 101, like how would you explain it to someone that has nothing to does not know what even like restoration or mitigation or adaptation is? Like, what would you say your mission is if you were to explain it to someone that has no terminology in the space?
Right. Ocean has been serving so much for us in the background. They provide food, and in fact, 90% of the clean air that we're breathing right now comes from the ocean. All of that are dependent on a healthy ecosystems. And the one science that we know about ecosystems, and a healthy one, is that everything is interlinked. And the central core of that health is all about biodiversity. So in that sense, we have to make sure that we have the ecosystem players, we have the right animals doing the right thing, so that we have the ecosystem service, benefit from the ecosystem service. So yeah, like we need the ocean rather more than they need us, actually.
It's like the ocean's like, what we're building in like the tech ecosystems, like the ocean's been doing like ages ago, with all the little things that are connected and the pieces that make it thrive and survive. So you're creating a product that basically helps restore a lot of that interlink of the different species, focusing on corals, to help with the mitigation of the decay of those ecosystems, no?
Right. That's how we started when we first got to Abu Dhabi. We are now integrated into this vertically integrated solution where we help our clients to identify where the risks are. We offer the solution, the hardware, tied it with the monitoring so that they know what are they actually investing in the water, what are the metrics, how do you define success, and what's the return essentially, and also including reporting to the regulators like the TNFD or IFCPS6. So we're kind of like the total solution, a one-stop shop that if you have nature dependence on nature, that's something that we can help you with managing your risk.
And how do you think this translates to everyday activities?
It's hard. I think what we're doing is the last resort. Going back to the restoration hierarchy, it's all about avoiding the damage in the first place. As of today, restoration, no matter how good the solution is, how it's amazing technologies that we're deploying in the water, we will still have no chance if climate change continue to go at this pace. So the one thing that we all can do is to be aware of, even going back to the coffee beans or a water bottle, all of that will eventually go to the ocean at the end of the day. It's just that there's a missing link that we don't typically see. But every footprint that we have, going back to the nature and climate intersection, everything that we do impact nature, climate, and climate at the end of the day is the other side of nature.
I think as a society, generally, people have a out of sight, out of mind kind of concept, and to your point, I really like we need the ocean more than the ocean needs us. Nature has millennia of history of adapting to change. Humans, not so much. As nature continues to adapt and move in this direction that we're pushing it, right? This is where it becomes more difficult for us. So I think that's important for people to recognize, is how much we rely on nature.
Yeah. And just another thought, I think, Vriko, and the work that you do, one thing to bring it back home is, the whole risk space, because this can, when you assess the impact of a certain, development or asset, and see how that can be impacted in X amount of years and what that would cost, this brings it back to home as well. But like, I think as Paul said, because it's out of sight, out of mind, and it's in the future and it's not in there now, the fact that it's not immediate gives a lot of distance for people to understand or to digest or be interested in, and B, to take action towards it. So I'll end and wrap up with a final question. What can we do to bring climate and nature tech closer to home? I know we've been doing a lot of, having a climate tech program, doing a lot of awareness, conversations, podcast panels are all ways that we can do that. But what is left to be done to make it feel more immediate, that people would feel that it actually affects their, assets in the future? And that can be in the billions and not in the trillions of dollars, if we actually want to dig into it. And that can be its own podcast episode. And Paul, what you were saying, the coffee that we drink and the food that we eat and our experience in a grocery store haul, right? It's not in the now, but what can we do to bring it more, to ground climate tech into this is an actual important space and encourage other people to become founders and to kind of jump on the wagon to beat this clock that we've actually missed the mark for, actually, after all.
Yeah, I don't know that someone needs to be a founder either. This is something I've talked about previously, but it's important to bring climate tech home in terms of what your capacity and your capability is, because climate tech is not just scientists and engineers. It's marketing, it's, finance, it's, business development, it's all these other aspects. So every job that kind of exists in places has a place and has an impact in what you can do in climate. So yes, of course, we want more people to start companies and to take tech out of the lab and into the field, but people shouldn't feel like they need to be limited there. It's about citizenship on a global level. When we define citizenship, it's what do you do with your chewing gum when no one's looking? Do you put it underneath the bench that you're sitting on? Do you put the extra effort in to walk it to the trash, right? It's taking that larger scale. What is the impact that you're doing to make sure you're being that member of society?
I love that, citizenship on a global level. We're all like citizens of this planet, I guess, at the end of the day, right?
Right. I love that too. I think being the responsible global citizens, being mindful of all the footprint that you're doing on a daily basis, definitely something to start with. Be the voice of the climate and oceans. More people need to understand this, and the more people talk about it, then more people would think about that it is a problem and also an opportunity for us to take action.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your journeys and your insights. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I think we have a lot of small nuggets to dive deeper, hopefully in the next episodes. Thank you so much, guys, for your time.